As is the case with the majority of my family's misfortunes, it all began with luncheon. The scene was painfully familiar. My father, Daniel, presiding at the head of the polished mahogany table, my mother beaming that tight, placid smile that never quite reached her eyes, and me,
Kayla,
attempting to blend into the floral wallpaper. In our family, Sunday brunch was an obligatory event, a weekly custom in which we find that everything was flawless. The soundtrack of our meticulously crafted illusion was the clinking of flatware against porcelain. I was mentally preparing for the inevitable inquiry about my career while nursing a cup of coffee. My father regarded my interest in architectural drafting and interior design as a cute hobby rather than a legitimate occupation. To him, success was quantified in terms of stock portfolios and corporate titles rather than blueprints and creative vision. He would always give me that pitying look and say, "That's nice, honey," whenever I mentioned a freelance assignment. However, when will you be able to secure a legitimate position with benefits? However, the inquiry that shattered our delicate equilibrium was not posed by my father. It was inherited from my grandfather. Grandpa Joe was the silent patriarch of our family, a man who had established a construction empire from nothing. He was a man of unyielding principles and calloused hands. He did not speak frequently. However, when he did, everyone listened attentively. His keen blue eyes had been observing me from across the table, and they had not missed a thing. "Kayla," he began, his voice a low rumble that penetrated the conversation. "How are you adjusting to your new condominium? It has been a few years, has it not? By now, it must resemble an article from a journal." I was enveloped in a chilling sense of apprehension. My coffee cup was halfway to my lips when I froze. He was discussing a subject that caused my mind to race in an attempt to comprehend. A new condominium? I resided in a basement apartment that was perpetually damp and cramped, emitting a faint aroma of mildew and shattered aspirations. The sole source of natural light was a solitary, high window that provided an extraordinary view of the garbage cans in the alley. I briefly observed my father. He briefly experienced a moment of anxiety, but he promptly concealed it with an ebullient chuckle. "Oh, Dad, you are familiar with Kayla. So modest. She cherishes that location. She essentially rebuilt the entire interior by herself. A genuine fixer-upper, wasn't it, my dear?" From across the table, he directed a sharp, cautionary gaze at me. My heart was thumping in my chest. I was unaware of the circumstances, but I was aware that I was being drawn into a deception. I muttered something noncommittal. "Cozy. I have claimed it as my own." Grandpa Joe was not content. His brow furrowed with genuine inquiry as he leaned forward. "I am merely relieved that the funds were beneficial. In this market, a down payment is not a laughing matter. I consistently advised your father. When the time comes, ensure that Kayla has a positive start. She deserves a secure, well-lit residence. That is all I desired for you." A hush descended upon the chamber. Unspoken tension reverberated through the air. The sum of money. What is the amount of money? I had been working 2 jobs since college, barely making ends meet by scraping together every dime for rent. My savings had been depleted by the security deposit for my subterranean dungeon. I observed my father's strained smile as I transitioned from my grandfather's sincere expression. The elements of a puzzle that I was previously unaware of began to align, resulting in a dreadful image. "Grandpa, what is the amount of money?" I inquired, my voice reduced to a mere whisper. "Bah." The smile of my grandfather diminished, and it was succeeded by a state of bewilderment. "The $100,000 that I gave your father in exchange for you, to serve as the down payment on your initial residence. 4 years ago, Immediately following your graduation, I transferred it to him. He informed me that he would assist you in locating a suitable location and manage the logistics. He then paused. Then his attention shifted to my father, who was now concentrating attentively on his meal. Daniel, what is she discussing? The snicker that my father produced was forced. Dad, I believe you are misremembering. Yes, we deliberated on it. However, Kayla desired autonomy. She was determined to complete the task independently. A true achiever. His speech was excessively rapid and his voice was an octave higher than it was customary. She secured her own apartment, which served as her initial residence. We were all extremely proud. The deception was so complete and audacious that it deprived me of oxygen. 4 years. I had been residing in a container for 4 years, consuming ramen noodles and feeling like a complete failure due to my inability to advance. On numerous occasions, I had wept myself to sleep, contemplating my actions and failings, my father's continuous reminders that I was living up to my potential, his murmurs of disappointment over my meager income, and his lectures on fiscal responsibility were all familiar to me. All the while, he was sitting on a fortune that was intended for me. My grandfather's pupils become constricted. He was a builder, a man who could identify a defective foundation from a mile away, and my father's narrative was in a state of disarray. Is that accurate, Daniel? He said, his voice descending to an unsettlingly tranquil pitch. Because I seem to have a very specific memory of a conversation. I also remember you informing me, not 6 months ago, that Kayla was so occupied with her thriving design business that she never had the opportunity to call her old grandpa and express her gratitude. She adored her 2-bedroom condo with the balcony. Each word was a devastating strike. He had not merely stolen the money, rather, he had actively crafted a narrative around it. He had depicted me as a successful, ungrateful householder who declined to acknowledge the gift that was purportedly the catalyst for her life. In order to conceal his actions, he had tainted my relationship with my own grandfather. My eyes filled with heated, acrid tears. The legs of my chair clanked against the floor as I repositioned it. I was unable to exhale. I was unable to remain in that chamber for an additional moment. Kayla, what is your destination? My mother inquired, her voice tinged with the same soothing, reassuring tone she employed whenever she encountered an unpleasant situation. I gazed directly at my father, whose visage was devoid of any color. I sputtered out, I require some fresh air, and fled. I did not pause until I was outside, gasping in the cold afternoon air. However, I was not left alone for an extended period of time. Grandpa Joe emerged from the front door a moment later, his visage a grim mask of thunder. He did not utter a single syllable. He placed a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. Let me enter your apartment, he requested, his voice as resolute and unyielding as steel. I am interested in visiting this cozy location for myself. The 10 minutes that I spent traveling to my residence were the longest of my life. I was trembling with a combination of profound sorrow, humiliation, and rage coursing through my veins. Grandpa Joe was seated in the passenger seat, his mandible clenched and his gaze fixed on the road. The car's silence was more oppressive than any argument. As he processed the betrayal, I could sense the storm brewing. His silence was exacerbated as we approached my building, a dilapidated masonry structure with corroded fire escapes. I escorted him down the shaky external stairs to the basement entrance. With each stride, the air became increasingly damp and cooler. I struggled with the key, my hands shaking so violently that I could scarcely insert it into the lock. My life was revealed as the door flung open with a groan. My diminutive, disorganized, single-room universe. The evidence of my hobby was the drafting table I had salvaged from a dumpster, which was pushed against one wall and covered in drawings and plans. My bed was a mattress on a simple frame in the corner. The kitchenette was equipped with a mini fridge that hummed noisily and a hot plate. And there it was, the single grime-streaked window that was high on the wall, allowing in a meager sliver of gray light. I observed as my grandfather absorbed the information. His eyes roamed over the peeling linoleum, the water stains on the ceiling, and the exposed pipelines that ran along the wall. The small, wheezing dehumidifier in the corner, a necessary appliance to prevent my clothing from feeling permanently damp, was approached by him. He touched the wall's disintegrating plaster. He examined my face, specifically the dark circles beneath my eyes that I had attempted to conceal with cosmetics. Then he turned his gaze back to the room, and for the first time, I observed the composed, impassive man I had known his entire life completely disintegrate. His visage contorted, not out of pity, but rather out of a white, hot rage that seemed to emanate from him waves. He began, his voice a strangled growl. Is this the residence he permitted you to reside in? For a period of 4 years? He struck the wall with his fist, causing a fragment of plaster to fall to the ground. The tiny space echoed with the sound of a gunshot. That thieving, lying, son of a Tish. He had never employed language of that nature in my entire life. The shock it was nearly as significant as the shock of the larceny. Grandpa Joe's voice cracked with an anguish that tore at my heart as he said, "He told me. He informed me that you were content. He stated that you were flourishing. He led me to believe that you were unappreciative. I have been deeply disheartened by the fact that you have never contacted me to express your gratitude, and you were unaware of this fact. You were unaware." The narrow floor was paced by him, and his large frame exacerbated the room's oppressive atmosphere. $100,000. I gave him that money without any conditions. It was an early inheritance that was given to you. A gift from your grandmother and me. Additionally, he absconded with it. He robbed you of your future and allowed you to reside in a crevice in the ground while he... Have you participated in the capital market? Purchased a new vehicle? Did you once again take your mother on a cruise? The fury was abruptly replaced by a terrifying, steely resolve. His pacing ceased, and he fixed me with a direct gaze. His blue irises were reminiscent of ice chips. "This is not the conclusion, Kayla," he stated with a voice that was deathly serious. "This is not solely about the financial aspect. This pertains to trust. It pertains to dignity. He betrayed me, but he also devastated you. His universe will be destroyed by us. You and I are scheduled to visit the bank tomorrow morning. Afterward, we will consult with my attorney. This is no longer a family dispute. This is a state of conflict." The following morning was reminiscent of the beginning of a new era. I did not experience the typical sense of foreboding upon awakening. Rather, I was overcome by an unusual, nervous energy. I realized that I was not alone in my strife for the first time. I had an ally, and not just any ally. My grandfather, a man who had constructed an empire, and also knew how to dismantle it. At 8 a.m., he collected me, acute. He had exchanged his customary weekend polo for a sharp suit and tie. He appeared to be on the brink of a corporate conquest, and in a sense, he was. The bank was our initial destination. His bank. My grandfather was greeted by the manager, Mr. Harrison, with a level of respect that is typically reserved for nobility. We were led into a private office that featured leather chairs and complimentary bottled water. "Joe, it is a pleasure to see you. What can I do to assist you?" "Mr. Harrison inquired with a cordial smile. Grandpa Joe's demeanor was anything but amicable. Arthur, I require access to the records of a wire transfer that I executed approximately 4 years ago. It was the 100,000 transfer from my primary investment account to my son, Daniel's personal checking account. Mr. Harrison's fingertips swiftly traversed his keyboard. He directed the monitor toward us a few moments later. It was there, in black and white, a transaction that occurred on April 17, 2014, 4 years ago. Sumperdal 100,000 Hutter from Joseph Miller, Daniel Miller. Not for Kayla's initial payment. Suddenly, my respiration became strained. The memo, the evidence was immediately apparent. My grandfather's voice was low and perilous as he continued. Now, Arthur, I require you to determine the location of the funds that were transferred from Daniel's account. I suspect that it was not left unattended for an extended period. Mr. Harrison was able to retrieve the subsequent transactions as a result of my grandfather's extensive history with the bank and the clear paper trace. Apparently, my father was a creature of extraordinary stupidity and a creature of habit. The following day, the entire sum of $100,000 was transferred from his checking account to a high-risk personal investment portfolio that was solely owned by him. I murmured, gazing at the screen. He did not even attempt to conceal it. Grandpa Joe muttered, "Arrogance." He never anticipated that he would be apprehended. He never anticipated that I would approach you directly regarding the matter. We obtained printed, notarized copies of each transaction. We traveled to the office of Grandpa's attorney, Ms. Alvarez, a sharp, no-nonsense woman, with the evidence in an orderly manila folder. She listened to the entire narrative without interruption, her demeanor becoming increasingly icy with each new detail. Upon Grandpa's conclusion, she reclined in her chair. "Joe, this is grand larceny and fraud," she stated plainly. "The criminal case could be complex due to the fact that you voluntarily transferred the money to your son's account. He could contend that it was a gift to him. Nevertheless, the memo line for Kyla's down payment serves as our smoke gun. This identifies the intended recipient and establishes intent. Daniel committed fraud by misrepresenting his intentions and misappropriating the funds for his personal use. Conversely, the civil case is an easy win. She devised an approach that was both innovative and uncompromising. We would not simply file a lawsuit against him. That would be quite disorganized and could potentially require years. Rather, we would employ the prospect of legal action, both civil and criminal, and the threat of complete family exile as leverage. Ms. Alvarez stated, with a predatory glint in her eye, "The initial step is a complete financial assessment. It is imperative that we ascertain the current value of that 100,000. It could be substantially more or less with 4 years in a high-risk portfolio." There were a few phone conversations performed. Our response was determined by the conclusion of the day. Despite his shortcomings, my father was not an inept investor. The initial DAR 100,000 had increased. It was now valued at just over $42,000. "Kayla, he has earned $42,000 with your money," Grandpa Joe stated, his knuckles turning white as he grasped the armrest of his chair. Ms. Alvarez declared, "That alters the situation. He does not merely owe you the initial amount. He is responsible for the entirety of the profit. It is referred to as disgorgement. It is unlawful to profit from illicit activity." The strategy was established. The confrontation was scheduled for the Sunday following the previous one. This time, the brunch was not casual. Rather, it was a formal family meeting held at my grandfather's residence. Attendance was compulsory. My father, sensing a ruse, attempted to negotiate his release by asserting that he was engaged in a golf game. Grandpa's text message response was chilling. "Please be present." Alternatively, I will dispatch the police to your residence to inquire about the $100, $1,000 that you embezzled from your daughter. The decision is yours." He consented to attend. The air in my grandfather's study was so dense that it was difficult to breathe. A room of authority, it was characterized by dark wood, leather, bound books, and the faint aroma of cigar smoke. My parents were seated on one side of the huge desk, and they appeared to be quite anxious. I sat next to my grandfather, who was seated in a large leather chair and appeared to be a monarch on his throne. A motionless, imposing figure with a briefcase full of documents, Ms. Alvarez, sat slightly to the side. Bluster was my father's initial approach. "Dad, what is the purpose of this?" "Involving attorneys in matters. It is somewhat excessive, do you not agree?" "It is merely a straightforward misunderstanding." Grandpa Joe did not even glance at him. He moved the folder containing the bank statements across the desk. "There is no misunderstanding, Daniel Bob. There is only one offense. The evidence of your theft is contained in that folder." Upon opening it, my father's countenance changed to a pale shade. He observed the wire transfer, the memo, and the immediate transfer to his investment account. The bravado dissipated, and it was succeeded by a dread that was desperate and akin to that of a cornered animal. My mother immediately intervened, fulfilling her customary role as a mediator. "Now, Joe, let us refrain from acting hastily. The money was merely being held for her by Daniel, investing it, growing it for her future. He intended to astound her." Ms. Alvarez exhaled a brief, arid chuckle. "A 4-year surprise. During this period, her father permitted her to reside in a subterranean apartment that contravenes at least 3 city housing codes. That is an innovative defense. I am confident that a jury would find it to be quite innovative." She received a venomous gaze from my father. "This is a family matter that is confidential, Doc. When you committed a felony, Daniel, it ceased to be a private matter," my grandfather stated, his voice as firm as stone. "You robbed my granddaughter. You deceived me. You have insulted the reputation of our family." My father was pinned by his gaze as he leaned forward. "The following is what is going to transpire. There are 2 alternatives available to you. Option A, I exit this room. Contact the district attorney and present him with this folder. Grand larceny and fraud will result in your arrest. You are likely to be incarcerated, lose your employment, and have your reputation tarnished. I will also omit your name from my will in such a manner that it does not appear in any capacity, not even as a footnote." He allowed that to remain suspended in the air for a brief period. It appeared that my father was on the verge of falling ill. "Alternatively," Grandpa continued, "you may select option B. By noon tomorrow, you will liquidate the entire portfolio and transfer the full sum of $142,812.41 to a new trust account that has been established in Kayla's name. I will review and authorize the formal letter of contrition that you compose for her. Finally, you will acknowledge that you are currently disconnected. You are no longer my heir. Everything will be passed down to your sister. Nothing will be distributed to you from my estate, ever." My mother exhaled. "Joe, you are not being entirely sincere. He is your firstborn." "My son is a thief who preyed on his own daughter," Grandpa responded, his voice reverberating throughout the enclosed area. "He made his decision 4 years ago. Currently, he is simply enduring the repercussions." Daniel's mind was evidently rushing as he gazed at his father, seeking an escape route or an angle. He was unable to locate any. He was subjected to a checkmate. My mother's quiet sobbing was the only sound that broke the stillness. Ultimately, he collapsed into his chair, a man who was shattered. Option B. He murmured the words tasting like charcoal in his mouth. I will select option B. The transfer was executed the following morning. A day later, the contrition letter was transmitted via email. Although it was rigid, formal, and entirely devoid of genuine remorse, it satisfied the specifications. It was approved by my grandfather, and that was the end of the matter. It was both profoundly odd and liberating to experience the aftermath. I did not communicate with my father. At subsequent family gatherings, he would appear as a specter, a hollowed out version of the man he once was. He replaced the arrogance with a quiet resentment, which he directed at me through pointed silence and averted eyes. My mother attempted to maintain the illusion that nothing had occurred, which was in some ways even more detrimental. However, my life began to flourish when I was separated from them. Moving out of the cellar was my initial action. Grandpa Joe insisted that I remain with him while I searched for a new residence. I resided in a residence that was characterized by ample space, natural light, and tranquil comfort for the first time. He would enter my provisional workspace in his guest room, examine my designs, and simply nod with a slight smile on his face. "You possess a genuine talent, child," he would exclaim. It was a greater measure of validation than my father had ever bestowed upon me. I discovered an apartment that resembled a dream, with my money in my name. It was a corner unit in a converted warehouse with lofty ceilings, exposed brick walls, and large industrial windows. It was a blank canvas that was entirely mine. For the first time, I was not merely designing for others. In my free time, I was also designing my own existence. I invested my entire being in that apartment. The plans were developed, the materials were procured, and the majority of the work was completed independently. On the weekends, my grandfather would visit, not to supervise, but to assist. He instructed me on the proper method for hanging drywall and wiring a light fixture, his aged, calloused hands serving as a guide for my own. We did not discuss my father. It was unnecessary for us to do so. We were constructing something novel, both literally and metaphorically. I made the decision to pursue my vocation with a genuine effort, as I was fortunate to have a stable home and no financial obligations. I allocated a portion of funds to establish my own modest design firm and develop a professional portfolio. I initiated my endeavors with modest undertakings, including the renovation of a friend's kitchen and the redesign of a nearby coffee shop. My labor was self-evident. My reputation expanded. I was awarded a significant assignment to design the lobby of a new boutique hotel approximately 1 year following the confrontation. Although it was a significant task, I was confident in my ability to complete it. My portfolio impressed the chief architect of the project, a woman whom I held in high regard. She reviewed my initial manuscripts during one of our meetings. "You possess an extraordinary eye, Kayla," she stated. "You are not merely observing a room, you are also witnessing the narrative it is attempting to convey. It is an uncommon talent." She spoke as she were pouring water on a soul that was desiccated. That single sentence had the ability to cure wounds that I was unaware were still bleeding. This past Sunday, I organized my own brunch function. It was not located in a cramped dining room that was tense. The sun was flooding through the expansive windows of my bright, airy apartment. My grandfather, who sat at the head of the table, was beaming with a pride that was so pure and unconditional that it almost made me weep. The table was filled with acquaintances who had witnessed me through the basement years. My father was absent. He had not been extended an invitation. I experienced a brief moment of pity for him, not out of sorrow, but rather from a peculiar, distant perspective. He had stolen my money, but in the end, he had suffered a much greater loss. He had forfeited his father's respect, his daughter's affection, and his own dignity. He was residing in a dark, cramped cellar that he had constructed himself. I experienced a profound sense of tranquility as I observed the life I had constructed, the home I had designed, the career I was passionate about, and the people who sincerely loved me. The betrayal had been a conflagration, but it had not consumed me. The old existence, the old insecurities, and the old me who was desperate for her father's approval had been consumed by the fire. I had finally, genuinely, constructed a home from the ashes with the assistance of my grandfather.